What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Welcome back to Truth Be Told, where we believe an experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, along with world-renowned psychic Eddie Connor.
Hi, everyone.
And famed astrologer,
Hi,
Rachel
everyone.
Lang.
Hello. Thank you for supporting our sponsors, Earth Friendly Products. For over 40 years, Earth Friendly Products have brought you the greenest home products for all your family needs. Go to ecos.com. That's ECOS.com.
And take your mind on a literary journey by traveling over to adventuresunlimitedpress.com to purchase books from many of our famed experts featured right here on Truth Be Told.
America. We know her, we love her as the land of the free and home of the brave, but is it actually true? Today we have a gentleman that has a powerful voice and outspoken message in a nonviolent way. Adam Kokesh is here to help us understand things that we were taught about America growing up, but not always as true as we might think.
Kokesh is an American libertarian talk show host, an activist, and decorated veteran of the war in Iraq. Later, Kokesh would come to disparage war and advocate for nonviolence, calling for a new American revolution and for the orderly dissolution of the federal government. Today, Adam is talking with our audience about his new book, Freedom.
Adam believes the essence of his book, Freedom, has the power to unlock our potential as a species and establish an enduring civilization based on peace, self-ownership, and nonviolence.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Adam Kokesh.
Adam's in the house.
Thank you so much.
How you doing, sir?
Outstanding, especially after a beautiful introduction like that.
Oh, great.
Great.
Well, I'm here, of course, with Eddie and Rachel.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
And I want to get started on, first of all, before we talk about your book, Freedom, because there's a lot leading up to the point to where you wrote the book, Freedom. And I want to go back to where you were in the military and fighting for America in Iraq. So tell us about your journey on how you got started in this passionate and wonderful way of being nonviolent and showing that you can protest, but yet having kind of backlash from your own government and military.
Thank you for putting it that way. Well, I have to say, first of all, when I was in Iraq, the only people I was really fighting for were the politicians, bankers, and war profiteers. War is the health of the state. It always has been. And obviously, there's the worst embodiment of statism, of government, of control by force. There's no greater way of controlling someone else than taking their entire life. And war is nothing more than the systematic destruction of human bodies by machinery. And when you wake up to that, that really can propel you all the way down to the bottom of the rabbit hole when you're starting with dealing with PTSD and getting back from a combat experience yourself. So when I was in Fallujah in 2004, I really believed that I was against the war before the war, but I really thought that the occupation that was somehow cleaning up our mess and doing right by the Iraqi people, and realized from my experience there when I thought that our unit, Civil Affairs, was going to be the tip of the spear rebuilding Iraq, and realized that we were really an afterthought, that we were there to support the grunts. We were there for an occupation. So I came home and I joined Iraq Veterans Against the War. There's a little more to it than that,
right?
Because and this is actually really important in terms of how I got to this point, in that I brought a pistol back from Iraq the first time as a souvenir. I bought it. I didn't steal it. It wasn't like it was acquired in any immoral way. I was in Civil Affairs. I had access to guys who had access to whatever they could get us. And I got a nice little pistol with some gold medallions on the handle. And long story short, got caught with it on a college campus and ended up getting in trouble with the Marines. And when I volunteered to go back to Iraq, got in trouble for it. And the day after I got a medal for my time in Iraq, I got busted down from sergeant to corporal and kicked out. Well, I didn't get kicked out. I chose to leave at that point, but they said I wasn't welcome back. And when I got out, I was just disgruntled enough to really start questioning things. And I think that's really important for us to remember, of those of us who are trying to make change in the world, that it's not going to be the class presidents or the valedictorians or the captains of the football team or the cheerleading squad who are the first ones that are going to question the system. It's those of us who are the victims of it, the downtrodden, the punks, the outcasts. And for me, it was just having that much of my life put on hold and insulted and by the system I was trying to serve that set me off. And I can't say that I'm some smart guy who figured this out. It really was my experience that propelled me to where I am today, starting with that at least.
Adam, how many men and women that are still serving, in your opinion, and I know this is a guesstimation type of question I'm going to ask you, how many of them do you think that are still serving, that are starting to come into this awareness that you have today?
Well, that's a really good question, and there are a lot of ways to answer that, because you can define your cutoffs in a lot of different ways. So I was on Camp Pendleton just day before yesterday, actually, doing a delivery. We're on the American Campfire Freedom Tour right now, getting our book out, and we had someone who asked for a direct delivery on Camp Pendleton, and we dropped off a couple piles of books there. And the culture of the military, as he helped me understand, certainly changed significantly since I was in. It kind of made me feel old. I got out in 2006. And the way he described it to me is that most guys in the Marines today are really just especially checked out of the moral implications of their actions, and that's kind of how I was. So there's a growing number who are waking up, and in my audience, I have a lot of veterans and active duty service members who tell me that all the time. And the thing is, most of them get out when they realize this, and they get out peacefully, and they don't try to make they just try to get out as smoothly as they can. So it's really hard to say, but of the I think a couple million that make up the entire military personnel strength, it's probably a little bit higher than the general population. And the way I like to define it, the important cutoff is people who understand freedom as a philosophy that is founded in nonviolence, who can articulate freedom as a moral principle. Yes. And if there are 1% of the population in America that understand this, that's 3.2 million Americans. That would be a lot. I don't think we're even there yet. I think we'd be lucky to say we're at 0.5%. Right. So in the military, even if it was twice as many as the general population, it might be 1%, 2%. And they're really not that isolated a population. They're just subject to a couple other forces of their experience, and if anything, the counterforce of being the most propagandized population on earth, also makes it a little bit harder for a lot of those guys to break out of that mentality.
Do you feel like, as a culture, we're moving more into a new paradigm where nonviolence is a recognized solution?
Absolutely, and it's I think more specifically the paradigm is of statelessness, of realizing that government is not a way to organize society because it is fundamentally violent. Everything it does is backed up by coercion, because taxation is theft. In order to get people to give them their money, they have to threaten them with locking them in a cage. And I look at the long view of human history, and it's very encouraging when you do, because you can see that we are living in the most peaceful times in human history. Right. Not just, in terms of warfare and everything else. And it's hard to accept this if you watch a lot of mainstream media and don't read a lot of history, because you go, oh my God, but there was just another war, and there's just another terrorist attack, and and you know what? Fine, that's great. But you step back, right now you are less likely to be subject to violence at the hands of another human being than ever before in human history. That's a beautiful thing to step back and celebrate. And I believe it is fundamental to the nature of life itself that it seeks harmony. And the way I describe my mission is to create a more productive and harmonious society by abolishing government. And it's like we used to accept a lot of violence. You go back to the state of nature of humanity. It was just sort of accepted before language that violence settled problems and disputes, and that's how things were. And now it's like we've eliminated that, not eliminated entirely in practice, but more or less, it's not, there aren't a lot of people going around saying, yeah, stealing is okay, and yeah, beating people up when you feel like it is okay, and if someone on the other side of the world looks at you funny, yeah, drop a bomb on their head, no problem. But then we make this crazy exception for government, and we carve out, oh, well, if you're government, it's okay to steal, it's okay to hit people, who aren't acting aggressively towards you. And we carve out this exception for government that really is just ridiculous. But again, stepping back, you go, well, hey, we only accept violence from government now, and even that is getting harder and harder as we get more and more connected. In order to conduct a war, you have to have a certain amount of disconnect from the troops and the people that they're killing.
That's true.
And in this connected world, it is more and more difficult for those conditions to exist. And in the book, there's a section called The Motivation for War. And it explains why governments always get away with as much or conduct as much war as they can get away with, as their populations will let them. And if you look at where we are, I was part of the global war on terror, and I look at that and I go, oh my gosh, what a tragedy. But then you step back and you go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is all they can get away with? They used to do things like Vietnam and Korea and World War II and World War I, and now this is the best they can get away with for the war profiteers. And, that's a really amazing thing to step back and appreciate as well. And it's getting harder and harder the more connected we are. Obama tried to get boots on the ground in Syria. Couldn't do it because the troops resisted publicly on the internet. How long have they been trying to get a war going with Iran? They can't, because when people are so connected, you can't just tell a lie that they're going to be able to figure out the truth of from the internet.
Well, I think it works both ways, too, because I think the internet has definitely kept us more in connection with what's going on immediately, but also I think the internet has also disconnected us as human beings, because where we used to have a face-to-face conversation, where a lot of younger generations, they don't even know how to communicate unless it's a text. So,
hold on. I certainly I don't mean to dispute the exact reality or the significance, or I should say the importance of your point, but I believe that in the bigger picture of significance, you look at how much connectedness is made possible because of the internet.
Which I agree.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who can screw it up. There are a lot of people who will spend too much time doing the wrong thing on the internet. I mean, you can say that, hey, we shouldn't have the telephone connect people because some people will just use it for phone sex, and then they'll be all perverted and connected.
That wasn't me. But, wasn't me.
Like you could point out all the crazy things people do about the internet.
Right.
And here's the other thing that's really nice about it as a political force or a general force for social change is the government can't really shut it down.
Right. They're trying.
Yeah, they can, but they can limit it. They can nibble around the edges. But look at what happened in Egypt.
Right.
And you guys know what the internet's really for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, half the traffic on the web is.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say when they cut off the internet in Egypt, there were a lot of young men with way too much time on their hands. And the slogan was, when the government shuts down the internet, it's time to shut down the government. And with technology, there's now just such an expectation of the benefits of it that the government can't suppress it. They can't take away this connectedness. And I mean, just in the age that we live in. I mean, what was the last time we had, a major force-on-force conflict? And the biggest even of recent. I mean, since the invasion of Iraq in March of 2003, which really wasn't quite a force-on-force conflict, we weren't able, I should say, the government wasn't able to convince the American military to go and just start decimating the country. They had to impose this mythology of, well, Saddam's a bad guy and he's a threat, and so we're going to go do this targeted taking out thing, and then we're going to, occupy. And that lie they were able to get away with. That mythology they were able to foist on the American people. But I don't think they could do. I mean, weapons of mass destruction. They tried that in Syria. They're trying that with Iran, and they're not getting away with it. And
That's true.
I was so involved with the Iraq Veterans Against the War when I got out of the military, and it was so frustrating to see that we didn't really have an anti-war movement. That a lot of the people that I was marching with, who I thought were really peace-loving, well-intended people were more just, liberals who wanted to soothe their own egos, who wanted to express their distaste for Bush. And as soon as Obama came in, there was no anti-war movement. It was really sad. It was really, really just pathetic. And then Obama had, his attempt to keep troops in Iraq longer than Bush would have had them there. So, again, sorry to get on that because I could keep going. But this has informed my activism now to get to the point where it's not enough to change people's minds on one issue. I mean, it's great that the impact of the anti-Iraq war movement stopped Syria from happening. I think the anti-Iraq war movement really can take some credit for that. For people saying, hey, you know what, we might not change our mind while we're making a mistake. We have too much pride and arrogance to do that. But we'll take the lesson with us next time and be, well, I don't know, do we really want another Iraq to happen? We won't admit that we're wrong, but we'll still have to learn from this lesson. And I think that the American people have, and the idea of a force-on-force conflict like that scale, there are a lot of 1 in a million chances that would have to happen for that to happen today. I'm not saying it's impossible, but what prevents it, what I've realized, is not just that kind of issue advocacy, but really changing the way people fundamentally think. And that's what the book is about, and that's what the new focus of my activism is. And that is that if you win someone over on an issue or, one principle or one theory or one idea, that's great. But if you don't change how they fundamentally think and they still fall for the propaganda, you're going to lose them. And the next time the government comes around with another policy or another proposal or goes to recruit their kids to join the military, they're not going to be aware of what's going on. They're not going to be appropriately skeptical of government.
Now, because I did not serve, and Eddie didn't serve, Rachel didn't serve, but what did you see?
Stop calling it that. Stop calling it that, please.
Okay. Well, but that's programmed from both my parents were in the military, and so that's just a terminology that we've been taught, and so that's just kind of what comes out.
And what would be a good terminology?
Yeah, what would be a good term to say?
Just to have been in the military or to have worked in the military.
Okay. So
yeah, and that's, if I may, just as an aside, that's so important to point out. We spent so much time editing this book to get the language honed,
right?
Because we don't even realize how much we've been programmed. The worst thing is that
the key word is programmed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we say we when we're talking about government. I hear other people say, when we invaded Iraq, and I'm like, you weren't there. Why are you taking
Right.
responsibility for this heinous crime?
Right.
It was government. It wasn't you. You're fine. You might have been contributing a little bit, but you didn't do that.
And I think a lot of people, and I've said this many times, a lot of people cannot get it out of their head in dividing, saying, when I say I hate the government, doesn't mean you hate America. America and the government and American government is completely different.
Because the government has segregated themselves.
Correct, as they are America,
as
and they're
supporters
not.
of the
And so,
well, I would even take a stronger stance, and if someone says that to me, I would if they're loving the government, I would say, why do you hate America? I mean, if you support the American government, you must hate America at some level to want it to be subject to central violent control.
I would say that hate is a strong word, and that if we want any kind of change, then love is the answer.
Absolutely.
So I think it's like if we can also look at our language and say we love America, and therefore we must love the government in its flaws, and love it enough to hope and to help it change.
And hold the space like what you're doing, Adam, to help raise the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hold on a second, and this is a really important point. I'm glad you mentioned it in those terms, because I don't want to reform the government. That's like trying to reform the mafia. And if you understand what government is, it fulfills a lot of functions, but what defines government is violent control, the threat of force backing it up, the territorial monopoly on violence. And if you say, well, we want the government, we just want it to be nonviolent, well, guess what? Then it's not government anymore. The point at which government becomes a nonviolent entity, it's not government. So we don't want to reform it, we don't want to help it, we don't want to love it, because by definition, it is the institutionalization of all of society's desires to control and dominate and manipulate others through force and violence and the fraud that is government. So I think we need to localize it in order to phase it out entirely and move past the status paradigm to a paradigm of harmony and true nonviolence.
And I think the government, as you said, is a government of violence because it's been doing this from day one through to Native Americans, to any type of like Irish, even, different cultures that have, African Americans. So it has, I mean, it's not just now a 21st century government. It's been this way from day one.
And if you're just tuning in, you're listening to On Air with Tony Sweet. I'm Eddie Connor.
I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Rachel Lang.
And we're on air right now with Adam Kokesh. He is an American libertarian talk show host, activist, and a decorated veteran of the war in Iraq. And you have a new book out called Freedom. But before we talk about that, I'm interested in something. I don't know if it's connected or not. My heart says it is. And what do you think, Adam, about how local police departments in small town America and then the metropolitan cities across the United States, how the F is it that they have gigantic fucking tanks and things like that? How does that all fall under the umbrella of our, quote, government, as you say?
Well, it really makes perfect sense, and it's totally in line with what the government does inherently as a violent monopoly. And it's really sad that we've been so convinced. Before I come to answer your question specifically, if I can give a little philosophical backdrop to this, we have been convinced that government is necessary to prevent bad actors in society, to deter theft and murder and rape. Yeah. And if you look at those problems, I mean, we'll go one at a time. Theft. You want to prevent theft? Well, how about you stop the institution that literally steals from everyone through inflation? And you might make the case that some tax is in some weird way voluntary, even though you go to jail if you don't pay, social contract, whatever. Fine. Even given that, what about the intergenerational child abuse of the national debt, of people who have no consent, who are born into national debt, are going to be paying for the mistakes of prior generations? What about the inflation tax, which steals from all of us through the creation of more money? All of us who are forced to use the U.S. dollar pay the inflation tax, which goes straight into the hands of the friends of the banking system.
And keeping so many people in the United States more poor than they've ever been, almost in recorded history, to create a great big divide between the top rich and then everybody else being just poor as dirt.
So in terms of individual theft, what does government do? They show up afterwards and write reports, at best. Lucky. If you're rich and you can, afford that kind of help government, if you can, get that kind of special treatment from the legal system, maybe government can protect you in cases of theft. But even those people who are really worried about theft, they don't rely on government. They protect themselves. So let's look at rape as the next issue, right? We want to say, hey, we want people to be secure in their bodies. Well, you might think the government has some effect of deterring rape, and it's pretty obvious that it doesn't. Again, it's like theft. It shows up afterward and writes reports. But what's worse is, just like theft, it creates a greater incentive, because government taking away the society's ability to deter theft with its own resources, and not only that, but in a free society or in a moral society, when someone steals something, they're responsible for making good on that crime, right, to make their victims whole. Under a government system, the government actually creates an incentive for people to steal, because instead of having to pay things back and really be held accountable for your actions, you get a punishment. You go to jail. It's not justice, it's punishment. And so the victim is doubly victimized, because their victim stole from them, and now government steals from them in order to provide free housing for their, inmate victimizer, who was the individual. Now, but anyway, but rape, to the issue of rape, governments actually promote rape, and most people don't know this, but I'll ask you guys, where do most rapes happen in America?
In the military?
In families.
Nope.
No, it is actually.
Good guesses.
I used to work at a sexual assault center. I actually know this one. It's mostly date rapes. That's where most rapes happen.
Not true. That might be true about what you see there, but in America, the greatest percentage of rapes are men in prison. and they are the greatest victims. Men are raped in America more than women, and it is in prison because they create a system that is set up for that kind of dangerous exposure to violent criminals who don't have any means of accountability in that system. Military is a good guess too, because there are a lot of rapes that happen in the military. That's the next place where they're promoted by government. Of course, you're absolutely correct, Rachel, to point out that there are a lot in families as well that people don't that people don't think of.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, and date rape as well. Yeah. And then you look at murder. All right, look at the problem of murder, just killing people. Well,
prison,
war, hello, and again, you look at the justice system here. Does it create a deterrent from committing murder? No. If anything, it reduces what should be the real accountability for someone who commits murder. So government actually has the opposite effect of all of these things. So to bring it back to your question about the police, why would you expect a group that is premised in its existence on you not even being a human who owns themselves? Why would they respect your rights? They will get away with everything they can. And the militarization of police is made possible not just by the acceptance of this premise by the American people, but the fact that now we have this overgrown military-industrial complex that is looking for any excuse to spend money. And that's really what it's all about, the federal dollars going into the local communities for the militarization of police. But if you can look at that specific phenomenon, I'm more concerned with the bigger background forces.
And I always when I wanted to be a part of the Young Democratic Party. I used to go to some conventions and stuff. But what I find funny today at 45 years old, that only time I ever see our government agree, or parties, not government, but parties agree, is when it's military spending. That's the only time I ever see them agree on anything.
Pockets lined.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Because when anything military, it's become, because a lot of times they do outsourcing to not government companies that build these products. Well, they're probably all lining their pockets with money.
Yeah, lobbyists and and corporate.
And when did humans get so desensitized about hurting and raping and murdering other humans just because they're, quote, in prison, and we're assuming because they're in prison they did something bad, when the ratio in America, we are the only country in the world who has a for-profit prison system, right?
Oh yeah, it's a big business,
and we have
huge business.
more incarcerated individuals per capita than any other country.
And who's getting paid for that? Who gets paid for that, Adam?
Who gets paid? Well, it's a lot of people getting paid along the whole justice train. You have private prisons, but even without private prisons, you have all the incentives of people who want people sent to prison. Obviously the drug war is the big one, and it's been. You know what? If I I know I keep going on tangents, but I got a cool story here with this book, because the other thing that is nice about jails. And, I spent 4 months in jail. Well, a total of 6 months about in my life, but 4 months year before last for civil disobedience in jail in D.C. And while I was there on my government-induced, taxpayer-funded spiritual retreat, I started writing this book. And if you know where people have a lot of time on their hands and a lot of reading gets done, jail is a nice place, at least for that. And we have a fan who is a counselor in a jail, and we sent him 5 copies. And he's been handing them out there. And one of the most important lines in the book is that if you lock someone up for doing something that you simply don't like, you are the criminal. And I think there are a lot of people in jail who, when they get that and really appreciate it, it's so important for them for shedding any conflicting feelings of guilt or remorse, because the vast majority of people in American prisons are there for nonviolent crimes, which means that the system itself is the criminal.
Right.
Well, and I'm going to have a little side question, but then I want to dive right into your book, Freedom, and then how Tony's listeners can get their hands on it. But with the men and women coming back from the military, fighting in the wars and that sort of thing, and they have their arms blown off and their legs blown off, and they're coming back without any real authentic support from our government, and not to mention all of the things that they have going on mentally and that sort of thing. Do you think there'll ever be a tipping point where we will in some way, shape, or form at least support them or find a way to give back to them what they've gone through as people who were serving the military?
Well, I mean, again, you're using the word serving, and
Yeah,
I
my
want
apologies.
to before. No worries, no, it's fine. I just to point that out. But and in my background, like when I got started with Iraq Veterans Against the War, I was still dealing with PTSD myself, and I ran a peer support group for vets with PTSD. When I ran a group home for vets in D.C. and talk therapy, of course, finding for yourself what takes that which is rattling around in your subconscious and getting it front and center in your conscious mind is the most important way to deal with PTSD. In case anybody is listening, dealing with that, whether or not you've had military service, we don't have any kind of monopoly on trauma. Certainly, just a unique brand of it, if you will. And again, for the perspective, I'm really not concerned about myself or my fellow veterans in this bigger picture. When you look at the lives of our victims, 1 in 4 children born in Fallujah today is born with birth defects.
Wow.
What about them? Depleted uranium poisoning. 1 million dead Iraqis. 1 in 25 people in that country.
Wow.
The continued economic suppression in Iran, not to mention Afghanistan and Iraq. I think it's kind of a first world problem. I saw a great. It's from a meme the other day, and it was just making the great point. America is so sick and twisted. Not only will we invade your country and kill a bunch of your people, but then we're going to come back 10 years later and make a movie about how killing your people made our troops sad.
American Sniper.
It's sick. It is truly sick.
Yeah.
It is so warped. It is so inhumane. It is such a disgusting continuation of the conditioning that we experience in the military, referred to as dehumanization of the enemy, that makes it easier to pull the trigger on someone because you don't believe they're fully human.
Ugh. That's horrible.
Yeah. And one thing that you said right at the top of the show, and the things that you were saying, and some people in the chat room are saying that you were spot on, and they're blown away by what you're saying. But what you said at the beginning of the show, you said it's not the valedictorians and the cheerleaders, star athletes. It's the what did you say, the
outcasts,
the outcasts, the misfits, the punks.
But what's sad about our society is they don't take your voice as serious as the ones that are the valedictorians and or the corporations, because then they're like, oh, see, they are the outcast. They're just angry. They're just and because I was just an average student. I was, I wasn't.
You broke out of the mold, though.
But I did break out of the mold. But I find it fascinating that you say that, because it is true. But what I find is sad is that people don't listen to those people like they did in high school, and it's almost like those people that were top of the class. This is not everyone, but that they're the ones that grow up and become the politicians and become some of the other leaders, and that have that selfish greed that's plaguing our country. And
wait a second. You're saying the popular jerks in high school grew up to be popular jerks? Oh my God.
Some of them. There's some who became enlightened.
Yeah, there's some that I mean, I'm not saying all, because I know some that are very wonderful people, but there are a lot of people that they it's the ones that come so easy to a lot of people. They get the greed, they get the ego, they get all that, and then they go on to become a lot of the politicians and the leaders of our country.
Yeah, and it's almost as if like we have a system that system starts in grade school.
In grade school,
early young.
You go to a first grade class, you can sit right there, and within 10 minutes you can tell who's going to be the class president, who's going to be the one that's going to get beat up, who's going to be the sissy,
who's going to be in prison.
Exactly. So it is all built. It's honestly built to start putting people against each other. Now I want to jump to freedom.
Freedom.
Well, hold on. I know I would love to talk about nothing more, but I got to comment on that, because part of the paradigm shift that's happening right now, maybe it's just that there have been enough cool movies celebrating the misfits and the punks and the outcasts, but I don't think people listen the same way. I think there's enough of us, and the most powerful thing about the internet is that it shows us, no matter what we're feeling or thinking, we are not alone.
Right.
And we are connected like never before. And no one, when before someone got beat up and, everybody else was laughing, they thought they were the only one inside going, maybe we shouldn't be laughing at this. And now, you can connect with people online and be like, hey, is this wrong? I really don't think this is a good idea. I don't think the guy beating people up is as cool as everybody says he is. And then they go, wow, really? I didn't think so either. I was just going along because you were going along. And I, the internet has such a huge effect of just shattering that mentality.
It's true. It's true. And because if you think about it, when I was a young, like probably 10 or 12, this is probably in 1980, my brother, had long hair, and it was the same way in the 60s. They didn't, just because you had long hair, they called them hippies, and they were drug addicts, and well, it doesn't mean they were. And I think that's where it's changed now, because now we do have very intelligent people that are just average people.
More average people are trusting and following their own inner guidance system, their own heart,
and
doing what's right, despite
and
what
the internet
they're seeing.
Helps.
Yes,
it
definitely.
does help.
It gives you community. It helps you feel like you're not alone.
All right, so let's talk about
Let's talk about the book.
Yes.
Well, see, the thing is, I'm not selling a book, so I don't have any real financial interest in this. And so one of the most beautiful things about being able to go on a tour like we're on right now is that we're giving it away. And it's free in every format possible online at our website, thefreedomline.com. We have no intellectual property claims over it whatsoever. It is completely open source. And it's just been amazing to be able, in this day and age, to be able to release a book this way.
That's incredible. How have you gotten a lot of support for it, for launching it in the way that you are?
Well, we did an Indiegogo campaign last year and successfully raised $30,000 in order to do this tour.
That's incredible. So, That's incredible. And one thing I love is how you said that you started this on your government-sponsored retreat.
Government-induced, taxpayer-funded spiritual retreat.
So in some ways, it's almost like you're giving back to the people whose tax dollars went to the time that you served, or the time that you were induced.
That's a nice way of seeing it. If I may share something else about the jail experience as it relates to the book, one of the things that I'm really excited about is the response of guys who work for the government, of prison guards and troops and cops. And when you are truly emotionally free, now, so I may say, we talk a lot about, in normal conversation, we're very comfortable talking about the emotional effects that propaganda has on us. And I'm sure you all know government propaganda is intended to keep us afraid.
Of course.
And dependent and insecure.
Yes.
And we don't really talk about the flip side of that, of emotional freedom. What would it be like to be impervious to that kind of manipulation? And freedom, I prefer to define, although it's a pretty irrefutable technical definition, respect for the individual will exercising its right, respect for the individual will being exercised within its rights. And when you understand it at that philosophical level, you see that there's an internal implication to this. Because when you wake up to the nature of government, everybody is brought down a little bit. Nobody goes, gee, the world's more screwed up than I thought. Yay! Everybody has some negative reaction. They're either sad or angry or depressed or afraid, and now afraid of what they should be maybe for the first time. And then they go out on the street corner and say, now join me in my anger and my fear and my depression. Everybody says, screw that. I'm going back to watching Dancing with the Stars. Why would I want that kind of a life? But when you go that next step down the rabbit hole to internal freedom, to personal freedom, then you can look up at a guy who's literally got his boot heel on your neck and smile and be happy. Because if you're afraid, if you're sad, if you're angry, they win. You lose. You are just as much a slave as the guy in prison. And when I was in jail, I was more free than the average American by a long shot. And I told every guard I had the chance, You're a free, beautiful, independent human being. You should never let anyone tell you otherwise. And when you can look up at that person with a smile, you realize they are the ones that need the help the most. And just like to what I was saying about veterans versus the victims of war in Iraq, it's not just that. It's the guys who are about to go out. I tortured people when I was in Iraq. I came home and I was tortured in jail.
Wow.
And when I needed help was not when I was being tortured. The person who needed help was the one who was doing the torturing. Wow. I mean, you think the cop who beats up protesters is a happy, well-adjusted dude who goes home to a good family?
Absolutely
Heck no.
not.
No, not at all. No.
I mean, you think the politicians who sell out this country every single day, you think they don't know what they're doing? You think the bankers getting rich off everybody else have no idea how they're holding back humanity? Oh, they know.
Oh, they know.
They absolutely know. Oh, they do. They know. Yeah. They're the sick ones. They're the ones who need help. They're the ones who need to be lifted up. And it's not an us or them mentality. It's humanity feeding on itself.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And those who haven't realized that we can get along better, that we are all capable of respecting our own will. Mm-hmm. We are all capable of this kind of freedom. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that need this message the most, not you guys. I mean, I could talk to you all day, and it would be of no consequence. If I go and talk to cops and they all decide to quit their jobs, that's revolutionary.
Right.
Oh,
yes.
I love that.
And I think that's one thing that, Eddie and I started this show for is truth be told, because people are like, well, that doesn't sound like the truth. I said, well, that's your opportunity to listen to everybody we have on the show.
And learn.
And take away the truth. And if you don't believe it, then go research it, because that's when we get knowledge. And knowledge is what? Power. And power is what scares the hell out of, and knowledge is what scares the hell out of our government, because they don't want you to be knowledgeable about what's going on, about the history of what we've done to this to this country. Not us, but they did.
Yeah. But also, I think to take that point a step further, and also what you're talking about too is that they don't want us to know ourselves.
They don't at all.
Because once we know ourselves, and once we stop numbing to the destruction that we're causing, the harm we're causing, the torture that's happening, once we stop being numb to some of those realities, then we start, like you're talking about, taking action and speaking out.
And then we won't be the little lambs that are being led into the Church of Scientology. I'm sorry, I mean our government. you know what I mean? Because once you wake up to that, then no one can guide you down a bad path.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, we have about just a couple minutes left, and I want you to tell us more about where we can get the book. Also, you have a podcast that people can go to adamversustheman.com.
No, we're not doing that anymore, and it's really important for me to show that what I've done is really, I've done a lot of misguided activism in my day, and I don't mean counterproductive, but inefficient. And I've been motivated by ego and grabbing headlines, and I don't think those are necessarily bad things. We shouldn't shy away from that, but we should be evaluating the effectiveness of our activism based on how many people we are changing how they fundamentally think. How many minds are we really freeing? And so I've shifted focus now. I still do a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Adam Kokesh, Kokesh, but whatever. The main thing is to go to thefreedomline.com. That's our main website. You can get the book for free. We sell the book in paper copies as close to it cost as we can get away with, and just to keep things going. And the audio book is free. The digital download's free. You can get it anywhere you get books, through any other outlet. Amazon Audio, Audible, iTunes, PDFs, e-readers, like all that stuff. It's all out there, every format, totally free. Please check it out and share it. The audiobook is just 3 hours long. There's no excuse not to get this, not to take it. And I've been issuing a challenge on this tour to everybody I speak to say, when you read this book, I want you to decide for yourself if it's the most effective way for you to wake other people up. And if it is, awesome. I'm so grateful that your activism includes this one thing that I was able to contribute to the freedom movement. And if not, the challenge is you better find something that is. You better find something that you can do that is going to change the way people fundamentally think. And the people who have taken this challenge are on board now. They're spreading this message. They are using the book. They are getting it out there. It's just 100 pages. It's in 60 very short sections, less than 2 pages on average. And it's you might think a lot of us have given up on the people around us, and this is what really kills me. If you can't talk to your friends and your family members about what's important to you, about what you care about, we're screwed.
Yeah.
You go out on the street corner and yell with a bullhorn with that fear and that anger and depression, and they're going to think you're crazy. And you might actually be, if that's what you're doing, and you haven't yet spoken to the people that you love about what's important to you. And I think this book, for people who have a difficult time communicating some of these deeper ideas, is an especially powerful tool to connect with those around them. So it's just been an incredible honor to see how people have taken this and used this with people around them.
Well, and something I know, too, in closing, Adam, and that is when you've known somebody your entire life and then you've been interacting with them your entire life, and suddenly they're brighter, they're happier, things are working for them, they've got that lift in their step, everything they touch turns to gold. When you see that happen for someone you love, you want to know what they're doing.
Right.
And what you're doing is bringing that. So I think that's going to be one of the most contagious ways that you're going to, in this grassroots campaign, wake up the fucking country.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Adam, thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure.
You're going to have to come back. I hope you take that invitation and come back.
Please do. I'd be honored.
All right. Thank you, sir. And don't forget to get the freedom. Hey, it's free. Come on now. All right. We'll talk to you soon. All right. Wow.
That was a lot of information.
I know. Yeah.
I'm actually, I didn't know what to expect. And Rachel, this time let's have you start and just kind of tell us your thoughts of what we just heard.
Well, first of all, I think that he raises some really interesting points, and I'm definitely going to check out his book.
Me too.
I love the whole idea behind it. I love the fact that he's giving it away for free.
That made a whole new respect for him.
Yeah, and it's really because it's living into all the principles that he's advocating for in the book. I'm totally all for 100% for finding nonviolent alternatives to solving some of the challenges and some of the conflicts that we have in our world. And so that to me is exciting. Anytime I can see a movement and I can recognize activity working toward that, I think we're moving in the right direction.
Right.
And it's an indication of this paradigm that we are shifting into.
I think so too. And then taking the parts out of this conversation that we had that feel the best to us as individuals. I really loved what you were talking about loving the enemy too, and the government.
Yeah.
Because on a higher level, you can't let go of something until you love it.
Right.
And the more you're mad at it or disgruntled with it, the more it is a leech on your ass.
It has power over you.
It does. And then I loved how he circled back around toward the end. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Where he's like, even with the internal freedom, the emotional freedom, the intellectual freedom, that a person can be sitting there with their boot on your neck. You can look up at them and be free from the inside out. I feel like that's his
power.
Me
message.
too. Yeah. I completely agree.
Jody?
Well, there was a lot said. I feel like that it's interesting how, and I think you caught this too at the end, at how he said he's come a long way even in the ways that he has
The ego.
expressed himself.
How he learned.
Yeah, and a lot has to do with, I think he's starting to realize, hey, I don't have to. It can be done in love. If I want this to happen, I have to respond that way. And then you also said something else. I think you were the superstar here today.
Yeah.
What? You were talking about how we've almost grown numb to what our government is doing, and I think sometimes that is the problem. It's like they keep us, like you said, so many people are at poverty level. So many people are struggling to just make a living and provide for their family, and so a lot of times we get numb to what's going on and the kind of force and the kind of brutality that is at the hands of our government, at the government. And we don't even realize it because we're just too busy trying to feed our families and survive. And, we just have to step back and take a look at all that.
Well, and another aspect of it, too, is I'm guilty of this. I was for most of my entire adult life, and that is if you play by the rules, if you treat people the way you want to be treated, if you do things fair and right and appropriate, surely something bad won't happen to me with the local police department
Right.
or the local government or something in, my inbox or being spied on my computer or whatever. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's flat out BS
Right.
because nobody is exempt from that kind
Nobody.
of terrorism.
Exactly.
And you can see now that it started actually when the second time we invaded Iraq and the Patriot Act kicked in. That is when the shift took. The government grabbed a hold of our throat, and that's when they're not going to let go of that now. And I think the people that are listening and think that. And I've heard this many times. Our government wouldn't do that. Yes, they have. They've from day one.
Since the beginning.
From day
All-
one.
all
And it's
governments.
All governments. It's not just our government.
Yeah, and it's not a Democrat and Republican
Yes.
thing either.
It is
It's
not.
No,
or a
no,
tea
yeah.
bag thing.
bipartisan, multi-partisan.
Yeah,
Right.
and so, but as we said, truth be told is all about learning, and I always call myself a spectator or an enthusiast when it comes to the UFOs and stuff we talk about, because I'm learning as we go, and this is what it's all about, is just learning every single time. And truth be told, every Friday, I hope you come in with an open mind. That is the biggest thing, is come with an open mind. And if you don't believe it, then research it. Go look for yourself.
And to bring it back around on a higher level, I am a firm, not that this isn't high, fast, and pure, I am a firm believer that we each individually create our own reality.
Completely.
Right.
We have free will as individuals. And yes, it would be fun to do an astrology reading on the United States.
I could, I actually have the
You
U.S.
do?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because-
Anyone can access the U.S. chart.
Because it is a
How long
consciousness,
does it
just
take?
like every single one of us sitting in this room.
Let's do it right now, if you
And-
don't mind.
but it's like we have free will, we have power, we have a soul, independent souls, and then we, of course, collective consciousness. Keep your thoughts and your feelings high, fast, and pure. Go out into the world with an open heart. Have a clear intention about who you are as a human being, and feel that so purely in every cell, atom, and molecule in your being, so that that light that is you is vibrating and changing humanity too.
Totally.
Yeah, it's slightly a more passive way, as it were, if you look at it through physical eyes and ears. It is also the most powerful way to shift humanity and the government and everything that we don't like right here in the United States. So breathing deep and filling yourself up with light, that's not some BS woo-woo stuff. It is the very thing that can change an entire world.
Gave me goosebumps.
You sure got pretty words.
Yeah. No, it's so true, because I think it has a ripple effect. And it's like you said, all of a sudden, like every single movement that we see that that changes the world for the better, we are all wired to move toward goodness and move toward light and move toward God, if you want to use it in those
community.
words. Community, totally. And so we are, anything that isn't in resonance with that path feels bad, and we have to numb ourselves. In order, we have to drink, we have to eat sugar, we have to smoke, we have to, do drugs. We have to do something to numb out that discomfort that we are not in resonance with our divine path.
And the higher we vibrate up and out, it's not that we're segregating ourselves from the people who need our help the most, the poor and the weak and the injured, and unfortunately some of the criminals, as it were, and victims as well, victims and victimizers. But as we raise that up, we're elevating their consciousness too, just through osmosis.
Totally. And then we have a craving to help. We have a
Yes.
craving to serve, because that's what happens. We say, it's not tolerable for me to be here and for my brothers and sisters to be here.
Exactly.
Well, and
Come
ultimately,
with me.
how can you help anyone else until you help yourself?
Yes,
totally.
There was a thing where they did a study. They set up the Salvation Army money kettles out in front of all of the Barney's department stores, the Macy's, the Bloomingdale's, in the metropolitan cities in the United States. And then they set them in the poorest cities outside of the Walmart, the Kmart, the Family Dollar store. Whenever they collected the money at the end, guess who put more money in the kettle?
The poor.
The poor.
The poor.
Of course.
Because
They know.
they know.
Yeah,
They've
can
been
relate.
there, they've suffered, they've struggled, they've gone to bed hungry, their children didn't have clothes or shoes, and they've been through it, and therefore they know what it's like to put that nickel or dollar in that kettle so that somebody else doesn't have to go through what everybody in this room has been through. And most of the people that had it really easy with the silver spoons in their mouth, they don't know that part of it. And we're not saying that they all have to go in and be starving kids growing up and be without anything. We're saying wake up. Wake up. And that's what I want to do whenever we pick a show, is get a group of high frequency people at the table that gives your audience solutions on the best way to look at this tumultuous period that we're in, and each of us give the audience tools that will literally change their life.
That's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
We could tie in astrology too, because we have one of these. We've been in this Uranus Pluto square series. For those who don't usually listen to my show, I'm an astrologer, so this is the perspective I come at.
What time?
It's at noon on Fridays, and so we have been in this tumultuous sort of turbulent period of change that we saw back in the 1960s. So we're kind of we're just coming out of a period just like what we had in the 60s. So we're all feeling this shift and feeling like something's got to move in the direction toward our flourishing, toward what we need as a culture.
And look at how it's mirrored. I mean, in the 60s, it was segregation, and it was like trying to integrate.
Right.
And I'm from the South, child. It was not pretty back there.
Yeah.
And you're seeing identical things happening
with
the
the
African American
police,
kids and the police department. It's crazy, but it's forcing us to look at it and to elevate our consciousness.
Totally.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is the stuff I love, man.
And the war conversation too.
Oh yeah, it's the very exact same thing. I don't know. Did you have a chance to do the America? If not, maybe we'll do it next time.
Let's do it on the air. The next time and talk about where we're at, and then all of us give solutions.
Yay!
She's a rock starologist.
She is. All right. Well, Rockstar, tell us how to follow you, get a hold of you, all that good stuff.
Find me at blissenup.com. That's BLISSEN up.com. You can also listen here at noon on Fridays, and I'm on Twitter at blissenup and Facebook as well.
Rachel, and then Jody, since.
Really?
Yeah. Since your voice.
I'm so honored to be a part of this.
Yes.
That was great that you could.
I'm at Jody McBrayer on Twitter and Backline on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock. PDT.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Eddie, what about you?
I'm here on Fridays.
And I am too.
Said like a true Southern boy. On Friday.
Well, next Friday, April 17th, Dean Ryan, who is also a writer, a social commentary and radio host, he directed and produced Adam Kokesh, one of his documentaries, and he's also worked with Alex Jones, if you know him from InfoWars, and he was a Coast to Coast AM as a segment producer. He's going to be in studio. He's going to be amazing. We've had him on, remember, with Sean Stone, Oliver Stone's son, back in November. And then we're going to be talking chemtrails. Wow. We've never talked about this before.
Fascinating.
So Sharon Schloss is going to be here actually in studio also. So we have 2 in-studio guests.
Yay!
Yes.
Very cool.
You can go to truthbetoldwebtv.com and check out all the upcoming guests. We want to thank Lisa Williams in our first hour. Love her. And then also, of course, Adam Kokesh. All right, we're out of here. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.